As the United States pulls out of Afghanistan, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani sits down with U.S. President Joe Biden. On the agenda, his country's future. Hello, I'm Ahmad Shah Mohibi, and this is The Heat. It was back in April, after nearly 2 decades of conflict, when President Biden said it was, quote, time to end the forever war. So as U.S. forces prepare to complete their withdrawal in the coming weeks and months, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani came calling, looking for concrete pledges of financial and diplomatic support and continued technical assistance for Afghan forces. For more, we turn now to CGTN's White House correspondent Nathan King. So Nathan, Ashraf Ghani's request comes amid reports that the Taliban has intensified its military campaign, launching new offensives in the northern part of the country. I know you have your ear to the ground at the White House. What have you been hearing?
Scratch the word reports. Absolutely. The Taliban have been making advances across Afghanistan in a worrying pace as well, not just in provinces, but also the cities that control the provinces. In fact, the Afghan government has mobilized some of the tribal militias that were very much involved in the civil war before the American invasion and the takeover of the Taliban. So this is really a problem. And I think Ashraf Ghani and Abdullah are here to essentially ask for not how much they're going to get from the Biden administration, but how little. It's clear that the U.S. is going to pull out and going to have just a few hundred troops left to guard their embassy in Kabul by the 20th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. And their mission is essentially reverting back to the days after that, which is saying that it's a narrow mission preventing terrorists to be able to take bases in that country and organize attacks on the U.S. homeland that they did devastatingly 20 years ago against the Pentagon here and, of course, the Twin Towers in New York. Let's listen to President Joe Biden, because he's very optimistic in his words, but his words are worth analyzing.
Partnership between Afghanistan and the United States is not ending. It's going to be sustained, and you know, our troops may be leaving, but support for Afghanistan is not ending in terms of support and maintenance of their helping maintain their military, as well as economic and political support.
Well, you know, that's Uncle Joe, as they call him here in Washington, with a positive gloss. The Afghan military is not doing well. There are multiple reports in the provinces that they are not standing up to the Taliban. In fact, the U.S. equipment, including Humvees, is being captured by the Taliban. Remember, these forces are often not paid for months, even though the U.S. has been training them for many years. And so this is the big worry going forward. Now, what can Ashraf Ghani and the rest of the government expect? Well, humanitarian aid. There are going to be visas given to a certain number of people who helped out the U.S. military in the last 20 years, but not all of them. This feels like a very Saigon moment, in a way. We may not see helicopters on roofs and the panic, but we are seeing a massive drawdown. And essentially, what the U.S. is saying is, we will help you, but we will not intervene if your government is threatened. And that's quite incredible.
Thanks, Nathan. That's CGTN's Nathan King reporting from the White House. Well, as you would imagine, there's much to talk about. Let's get straight to our panel. Victoria Fontan is a professor of peace and conflict studies at the American University of Afghanistan. Tabish Forugh is a political analyst and former Afghan government official. Also with us, Ahmad Shah Mohibi focuses on terrorism, violent extremism, and international security as the founder of Rise to Peace. And Omar served as Afghanistan's ambassador to France and Canada. He's currently a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's South Asia Center. Thanks to all of you for being with us. And Ambassador Omar Samad, let me start with you. You were part of the Afghan delegation to the White House. What was the atmosphere like? What was the tone during this meeting, and what emerged?
Well, thank you, Anand. I was part of the overall delegation assisting Abdullah, and I think if you look at the complexities on the ground, and if you look at the decisions taken in Washington, and if you look at what the Taliban are doing and where Ashraf Ghani and his government sits, you realize that things are not going the way some people thought in Afghanistan. And I think listening to all the different discussions over the last 2 days, especially the one today at the Pentagon and at the White House and the National Security Council, that there is a moment, a watershed moment ahead. And everyone is trying to make the most of it and the best of it. But there are a lot of questions. And the Afghans are looking for Americans to reassure them about the path forward. And the Americans are looking at the Afghans saying, this is your country, and you need to make sure that with our help, of course, still, and the other international players, that you can put it back together. So there's a lot of talk about war these days, whereas I think the focus should have been on peace and on how to end this mission and then open the door towards a settlement. Unfortunately, it's taking a different turn. And I think the time, to answer your question, time will tell from the discussions today whether Afghanistan is going to take the path of peace eventually, or it's going to fall into another unsavory situation with a civil war. And let's hope not.
Ambassador, reassurances are one thing, but did you detect any concern among the Americans on the new Taliban offensive that we're seeing in Afghanistan right now? You know, our reporter, Nathan King, just a moment ago, described this as Biden's Saigon moment. That was a reference, of course, to the U.S. withdrawal from Vietnam after being defeated. What did you find from on the American side? I mean, are they saying, look, you're on your own right now. We understand that there are deep security concerns, but we're not going to intervene?
Well, yes, I mean, the Americans are concerned in two ways. One is that nothing really bad happens while still on their watch, while they're still in Afghanistan. So obviously they've been keeping a close eye on that. But the Americans are expected to be leaving totally by within the next few weeks, actually, not even September, unless again there's a change in the scheduling. On the other hand, it's a legacy moment. The Americans are also concerned about legacy. So what are they leaving behind? And if they don't think about it, they ought to. At the same time, the Afghans obviously have to take more responsibility. They have to find solutions instead of finding ways to divide society even more. So we are hearing about militias arming. We are hearing about the Taliban doing this. And I think that it may not be the best scenario. So diplomacy has to now come into play, in my opinion.
Yeah, Ambassador, you know, you talk about legacy. Look, the United States went into Afghanistan more than 20 years ago to bring stability, to fight extremism. And I think it'd be fair to say that they failed with both those goals. So what was accomplished in 20 years?
Well, I mean, I can give you a laundry list of what was and what wasn't, and how and who did what and who didn't do what, and what we should have done, ought to have done, and did it.
Yeah.
We can talk about this all day long, but we are where we are. At this point, we need to make sure that Afghanistan doesn't slide into a worsening situation.
Right.
It's not good for the country. It's not good for the region. It's not good for our neighbors, including China and many others who are worried and concerned about this. And it's not good for the American legacy. And even, in my opinion, at the end of the day, it won't even be good for the Taliban, even if they are able to take all of Afghanistan, because then what are they going to do? So the question comes up. And there is a afterthought thinking that the Taliban may be pushing to a certain limit, and then maybe saying, okay, now, do you want to walk? Do you want to talk? Do you want to sit down and seriously negotiate? Because you wasted 3 years now while we were waiting for everybody to come and sit at the table.
All right, let's look at the situation in the country. As the United States and other forces continue their withdrawal from Afghanistan, the Taliban are reportedly gaining ground. We have this report from Nick Robertson on the situation in the country.
In a recently overrun army base in northern Afghanistan, Taliban show off captured heavy weapons and ammunition. CNN cannot verify the authenticity of the videos or the date they were filmed, and Afghan security officials could not confirm or deny Taliban claims in these videos to CNN. But they do admit to losing dozens of towns in the past fortnight. The Taliban claim 90 such victories in the past month. The UN says it's less. 50 of 370 gone, but still very concerning.
Most districts that have been taken surround provincial capitals, suggesting that the Taliban are positioning themselves to try and take these capitals once foreign forces are fully withdrawn.
At times, the Taliban claiming wins without firing a shot. In Tahrir province, a whole column of up-armoured American-made Afghan army Humvees are surrendered by government soldiers to the Taliban. The soldiers dump their guns in a pile, a valuable boost for the Taliban, who are fighting hundreds of miles from their heartland in the south and east. Afghan government officials say they're sending reinforcements to take back control and claim without proof to have killed hundreds of Taliban. The Taliban offensive appears to take advantage of the US and NATO drawdown, limiting air support for Afghan troops on the ground, and raises questions about their intent at peace talks in Doha with the Afghan government. It's also significant that they're attacking the north. I covered the Afghan conflict in the 90s when the Taliban were fighting their way up the country. It took them years to get up to the north. This will send a very chilling message to Afghans. The Taliban surge, also a concern for US forces, who agreed their own ceasefire with the Taliban as they exit their longest war, but hoped they might leave the country at peace.
That was Nick Robertson reporting. Well, let's get back to our panel right now. Tabish Forugh, you co-wrote a piece today, on today being Friday, in which you say the security situation in Afghanistan is deteriorating. You say the Taliban is filling a vacuum that the US left behind, and prospects for a civil war have already been rising. Short of US troops remaining in Afghanistan, what can be done to reverse this situation?
Unfortunately, Biden's hands are tied. I mean, the military option is out. The only available solution is to provide sustained air support to the Afghan military forces on the ground, and perhaps focusing more on peace, as Ambassador Samad mentioned. Because what is currently on there in the ground is a royal mess left by the United States and by an abrupt sort of withdrawal. Of course, no one makes the case for an expansion, continued American presence for an infinite time, but the way it was arranged, it emboldened the Taliban first. Second, it created a crisis of confidence within the public, among the people in Afghanistan, and of course in the partners in Kabul. I mean, Ghani, of course, seeking a sort of desperate remedy, a quick fix to make all this work. But the reality is that the situation is far more worse than it's reported, because first of all, there is lack of political coherence among the political elites in Kabul to focus on a consensus which makes a united front at the negotiating table for resolving the conflict. Second, the uprising of the people against the Taliban seems to be a patriotic move supported by President Ghani, but that is a resemblance of what happened in the 90s. At the absence of powerful military engagement against the Taliban, these forces could simply turn into the enemies of the state as soon as they drove the Taliban back from the areas, right? So the chaos is in many levels. So what possible to do is to make sure that to limit the damage and restrain the damage that is currently inflicted to the Afghan state, first of all. Second, boost the energy and the morale for an inclusive, people-centered peace process that gives chance for peace. And a requirement for that is to make sure that Ghani and his cronies, which are having a bad reputation for corruption and poor governance, are leaving in a certain date and allowing an interim administration to take over.
Yeah. Okay, Ahmad Shah Mohibi, the Taliban signed a deal with the United States and with the United Nations as well, saying that they would cut all ties with al-Qaeda. That apparently has not happened. And now there's a new United States intelligence report which says that the Afghan government could fall within 6 months. And this report was from US intelligence and could be an effort by elements within the US establishment to keep troops in Afghanistan. We don't know that. But what is your view of the situation in the country?
Well, I don't think collapse of the Afghan government in 6 months is realistic to say, but I could tell you this, that the Afghan government is really suffering. It's not about the capabilities of the Afghan soldiers and security forces. It's just about, as I've always talked about, it's the lack of leadership. When a soldier cannot get paid on time, or does not have the food or air support, or waits for an air support, but then the Taliban approaches, then that is the problem. That is what's happening in Afghanistan. The United States strategy in the entire Afghanistan in the beginning was to create a strong institution, and that strong institution helped the American government to combat terrorism, and that failed. I think right now, the current Afghan president and President Biden meetings today, I don't think it was more about the peace process. It was about the U.S. reinforcement of creating a structural regime in Afghanistan. There's a problem, Anand, in Afghanistan, and that is the centralization of power, and that is a lot of ethnic and a lot of rhetorics that has been catastrophic for Afghanistan. If I give you an example, President Ghani has appointed so many different Minister of Defense and cabinets that it takes him a couple months for someone to get used to position. In a critical situation that there is a peace talks happening, it all gives upper hand to the Taliban. So I think the meeting for today was more about building a structure of the regime and creating an inclusive government. So as long as there is no unity and as long as there's no strong Afghan government, the more provinces, more villages will collapse. I mean, as the result of the whole people's movement or armed militias, it's good right now. It's good that the Taliban are all kind of scared and you're taking trenches back. But again, this is going to be also catastrophic if, put it together, if the Taliban gets, defeated on those districts and provinces. So having a strong supply and leadership and Air Force support and giving them the proper food for these soldiers to eat is the easiest way you could do it from the bottom ground. I think on the upper level, on the Kabul politics, you just have to make sure to avoid sidelining key political leaders and decentralizing certain policies.
Right.
I mean, look at the Afghan administration. I mean, with the whole policies the past couple of years, it never worked. And I think it's time to change.
Okay, let's go to Victoria Fontan. She is in Kabul at the moment. And Victoria, thank you so much for being with us. I know it's very late, early hours of the morning actually, in Kabul right now. President Ghani has been pressing for the Taliban to join some kind of interim government. In fact, the Taliban says that it is committed to peace talks and wants a genuine Islamic system. I mean, where do you see this going? Do you see any kind of stable interim government emerge?
Well, there's been a lot of talk about that possibility here in Kabul, and what's come out from the different conversations that I've had with different leaders is that there is still a lot of disagreement with regards to some of the key positions that would be held in that particular interim government. And it's not necessarily about the nature of the government, but again, the nature of some of those positions. And this is going back to the same political games that have been taking place for years and that the United States is quite tired with. So I guess that from the perspective of what could happen, this unity that is necessary to confront the Taliban, but also to include them in a reasonable manner within a political structure. That particular conversation needs to be about unity and moving forward and peace and sustainable peace, instead of who is going to hold what ground and what particular ministry. And I think that this is the key. And again, if that mindset doesn't change, then unity, peace, sustainable peace, and the way forward will not be able to even be on the agenda. And that's really what's at stake here. It's not about keeping one's political stance and keeping power, one's individual power, but It's really about the good of the country moving forward.
Right. Anand, if I could jump in very quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
My point was that, yes, unity is a big need for Afghanistan, and Afghan people are paying the price for the past 40 years. When Afghanistan is in a critical situation, let's talk it from the military perspective. When Afghan soldiers are dying left and right, villages are falling to the Taliban, you don't have to change the Minister of Defense right away. You just have to be prepared to talk to the Taliban. That's the point. Of course, unity is the key to success in Afghanistan, and that's what President Biden announced today. It's Afghans themselves to make their countries, not us. We will support them. Of course, unity is the key, but you got to be militarily, strategically, and diplomatically also aware.
Victoria, I just want to get back to the point on the military in Afghanistan and their effectiveness in maintaining some kind of stability in the country. As we've just heard, they've not been paid, they've not been getting food, morale is very low. Do you think at this stage the Afghan military can stabilize the country, they can keep the peace?
Well, first of all, my colleague is absolutely right. It's about being paid on time, and it's about confidence in the leadership. Mm-hmm. I would say that the capacity is definitely there if the population supports that military. And so it is true that militias have started to work alongside the military in some regions to actually repel the Taliban. But it's not just militias, it's also popular mobilization forces, people just taking up arms. And I think that, you know, any conflict and any insurgency is one with hearts and minds. And right now, it's about the population supporting that military even more and realizing that they can all together repel whatever comes to them if they wish to, of course, because it's about, again, what Afghans want, okay, and their interests.
Ambassador Omar, this announcement that was made by President Biden last April to withdraw troops from Afghanistan, it came as a surprise to many people. In fact, the United Nations says it came as a surprise to them. And we do know, as I said earlier, that there are elements within the foreign policy establishment here in Washington that would not like to see this. And if we look at the situation that Afghanistan faces right now, is this pullout perhaps happening a little too early?
Well, it's very subjective, and you know, you ask one person and they would give you. I think Foreign Affairs did a survey of dozens of foreign policy experts just yesterday on this, right, yeah. And the majority actually said that they approve of this decision strongly and approval normally. So I think that you know, this issue has been discussed in Washington for a long time. It's not a sudden issue. It was Mr. Trump who started, even before. Listen, I remember 2010, Mr. Obama at the Lisbon NATO summit decided and said and announced that we are going to leave Afghanistan. It took the United States another 11 years to actually start doing so. And meanwhile, tens of thousands of people died in Afghanistan. And we had many opportunities to go and start, sit down, and have a discussion with the Taliban, have a discussion with regional players, have a discussion among ourselves, and stop playing these games to prolong. And it's become a power struggle, which is the worst thing that could happen. Some of these militias that you talk about are actually people who are involved in smuggling. There are people who are involved in the gun running. Some of these people are now taking advantage of this opportunity to bolster themselves, and that is not a very good thing. It is not a genuine uprising. It's not organic as some people claim to be. It is partly obviously a reaction, and it's partly actually pushed by the government, because the government now doesn't have the ability to use the army. It's using the commandos in Afghanistan to protect itself, and it's using the Air Force to attack wherever it can, and even that is becoming more difficult because the pilots are scared of being shot. So I think that we're in a situation we really need to take a step back from the militarization of the Afghan conflict again. Yeah. We need to take a step back. We need diplomats, we need politicians, we need the UN, we need others to step in and say, we need de-escalation, we need to calm things down, we need to talk to the Taliban in a way that they could, again, agree that the political process is the best way to go forward for everyone.
Tabish Forugh, what are the regional implications for this United States pullout? Could we, for instance, see Pakistani influence grow in Afghanistan? And how would, for instance, India respond to that?
If I don't sound too pessimistic, I mean, what Pakistanis are looking for is establishing a puppet government in Kabul, incapable of defining its foreign policies, incapable of dealing with the region, and of course, more sort of restrictive vis-a-vis India. That is the first goal of one of the major players in the region. Of course, Indians are having their own sort of reservation. Recently, they have started, not at least through diplomats, but through intelligence officers, contacts with the Taliban. They are afraid of a repeat of the 92 when Dr. Najibullah, while India put all its weight behind Najibullah and Kabul collapsed, and India was out of the game for at least another 8 years before the Flight 814 that was hijacked by the Taliban in Kandahar, and Indian Foreign Minister went there and discussed and negotiated with the Taliban. So the regional implication is that the jihadist, international jihadist Islamist forces are seeing this as a victory. If the Taliban could do it in Afghanistan, why not in other parts of the region, right? The Russians are more worried that the spread of the extremism on the other side of the Central Asian republic's borders, including Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Turkmenistan, could threaten their geopolitical interests. Chinese are very much involved with the Taliban. They had many sort of track to diplomacy conferences with the Taliban where they discussed opportunities and possibilities of dealing with a Taliban-shared government, not a Taliban-dominated government. But the thing is, the vacuum creates this geopolitical vacuum, this geopolitical opportunities for the rivals of the United States to fill in the gap and push against the interests of the United States and its allies. Last point. The threat of Taliban and their interconnectedness with Al-Qaeda is still there. That is too optimistic to believe that Al-Qaeda is defeated completely. Unfortunately, with all these extremist forces, they have this flexibility, this adaptability capacity that they can jump back, they can bounce back and reorganize and reemerge. The threat of repeating what happened in Iraq is very much alive, and it's threatening.
I've only got a minute left, and I want to go to Victoria. Victoria, there are deepening concerns about some of the rights, hard-won rights that have been won by women in Afghanistan, and that there is a likelihood that could suffer a setback if the Taliban are in government. The Taliban, for its part, says that it is committed to women and their rights, but it says that women will enjoy their rights under the provisions of the country's cultural traditions. But could this be a setback for women in Afghanistan?
Well, absolutely, it could be a setback. And I think that it's also important to stop always focusing on the Taliban and their narratives, because what is the culture of the country? In my university, we teach about Islam in the 15th century and the culture of Afghanistan, which is completely different, and where men and women would learn together in the same environment. So there's a different Afghanistan out there. Women are out there. They're part of civil society. They are professional, and they are definitely ready to be part of society as much as men, and to continue being part of society in the same way that they have for the past 20 years. So it's not just about the Taliban.
Okay, and I have to leave it there. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for watching.